Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Dixon, and today we've got Trevor Lee on the podcast. He is the founder and CEO of a company called Myko. They are an AI tool that sales reps can use when they're out in the field, and they can record a voice note and essentially telling themselves what they need to do based on the meeting that they just had. And the AI will connect with all of their back-end solutions and execute on all those tasks. So we dig into how that actually works, some of the use cases that the sales folks and the clients that he's working with are actually using. But we also dig into how it was for him to start a business and actually how he pivoted partway through the business and changed the model, changed the product, raised some money in a very difficult time in 2023, and ultimately is building a successful AI business. And also we talk about how he's using AI to help him build that business. So really interesting episode. So let's get Trevor on the pod. Interested in hearing conversations with private equity leaders, CEOs of private equity-backed companies, and startup entrepreneurs where they share their stories about their career journeys, starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, and the important role that having the right talent plays in building a successful business, then you are in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. Here's your host, Justin Dixon. All right, Trevor, welcome to the podcast. Good to see you.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's jump in. Why don't you give everybody a little bit of an overview of who you are, where you are, and what you're up to right now?
Yes, my name's Trevor. I'm co-founder and CEO of Myko, located in Miami, Florida. And we're building AI for outside sales teams. You use voice to interact with all of your software and carry out all of those annoying administrative actions.
So maybe give a little bit of a high level before of how that works, and then we'll dig into some other stuff. But AI is a very popular 2 letters lately, and so I guess curious how that works just from a brass tacks perspective.
Everybody's got AI now. So what our product does is sellers out in the field or anyone who does a lot of in-person meetings able to take out their phone. Our app plugs into either Slack, Microsoft Teams, or the Salesforce mobile app. You open it up and you can hit record. You record a voice note anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes long, oftentimes. That'll be a verbal dump of everything you talked about in the meeting, all of those action items, things you might have to update in Salesforce or other systems of record that your company uses as well. And our product will go find all the right places to put the data. It'll figure out what are those next steps and action items that you might have to fill out. Moving the opportunity to the next stage, adding additional information on the account, and then we recommend it back to the seller. So all they kind of have to do is talk about what happened. We figure out all the kind of painful next steps from there. So saving on the admin time so that they don't have to go log into any systems. They can kind of verbally handle all of those tasks.
So it's a dictation kind of notepad kind of thing where you take a verbal note of, hey, I just got a meeting with John at ABC Company. We discussed these things. I need to send him a quote for this type of product or whatever. And I need to also loop in Sally from marketing because she needs to do something. And so saving that will essentially, AI will then do all of that stuff, like ping, build the sales pitch and all that stuff? Or like, is it more of a, hey, don't forget to do this?
Yeah, it'll kind of get the quote together. It'll ping Sally, whatever needs to be done of those things that you talked about. It'll go and start doing each of those action items for you and recommend it for you right there. So we can handle a lot of that follow-up.
And so how does the AI, like, what are the interactions or what are the things that, if I'm a small business, right, and I've got field salespeople that I would love for this to help support, what are the things that a company needs to do to make it as efficient as what we just described? A seller records a note, and then hits submit or whatever the function is, and then AI just does the rest. Because it's not just like you can pull it out of a box and it's all connected. You've got to build it, set it up on the back end.
The good news is we build it and do all of the stuff on the back end. So companies themselves don't have to do much during the process. When we connect during implementation, we'll sit down with your sellers for 1 to 2 meetings, record their screens, and really dive deep into the workflows. how they're currently doing things now, what are the different Salesforce objects they touch, what are the other systems that they're using. And then once we go through that, it's often usually within 2 to 3 weeks, we have the product back in their hands ready with not 100% of the workflows and everything. We'll usually start a little bit smaller, but a good subset of a lot of the action items that they'd be looking for. We get it back in their hands so they can start testing it, and they don't have to go through that onboarding implementation process and build it themselves. So we try and handle as much of it as possible, just so that even when we're selling people, it's not a big lift, right? Like if we take all the work off, your admin and ops team is probably underwater with 17 other things you've asked them to do this year. So we try and make the burden as light as possible for them.
Well, I mean, I've hired a lot of salespeople and know a lot of salespeople, and the last thing they want to do is sit down, especially if they're at a conference or something, right, where you're meeting dozens of people, that you want to sit down and you've got a business card and maybe you took a few chicken scratch notes on the back of that business card and you're like, all right, here are the things I need to do. And you probably went out to a happy hour. And so now you got to remember all this stuff, right? So what yours seems to act like is you meet somebody at a happy hour or you're at a conference, you say, hey, don't forget to send Trevor a follow-up email about this. And instead of just reminding you to do that, your solution will then send that email.
Yeah, that's right.
Fascinating. How did you, so I'm always curious about people's origin stories about, starting businesses and all that stuff. And so maybe let's go back, because you started this company back in August of 2020. It looks like, at least according to LinkedIn, maybe you did some work before that, but maybe let's go back to that time period. How did you come up with the idea? Was this the first iteration, or is this kind of phase 2 or kind of option 2.0, or how did it all work?
How much time you have? So we can go. I
got the rest of the afternoon. You go. You just go.
we iterated. We iterated quite a few times. So when we first started this company, my co-founder and I had just graduated from business school. Originally, the product was a financial modeling tool, so totally unrelated. You could take data from systems like QuickBooks, pull it into Google Sheets and Excel. So you build financial models that were linked to the underlying data. Built the product, had it in users' hands. We're doing a couple thousand in revenue a month, but we never really got like venture scale growth. It was always a nice to have, not a need to have. My co-founder has a really deep machine learning background, and we always wanted the company to be an AI company. Originally, it was meant to be a big data play. That never really came to fruition. But when we saw the language models like DALL-E come out in summer of 2022, it became immediately obvious to us that language would be this new interface in the way that people handled their work, and especially in larger enterprises got work done. So we built our own language model from scratch and released it 2 weeks before ChatGPT came out. It was all focused on financial data. So you'd be like, what was my revenue for the last 3 weeks? We'd give you that answer. We went viral. We got a ton of users, but there's still no product market fit. It was a nice to have. It wasn't a need to have, especially for finance teams. So we started doing a lot of customer discovery and saying, okay, we know that work is going to be done through language. What's a better kind of vehicle and endpoint for this? Really landed on the sales use case. So it was shortly after that, we raised the seed round from Khosla Ventures and started building really this AI agent for sales and sales teams to help them interact with their different systems. And so we've been building that for the last 1.5 to 2 years now.
Fascinating. I always love when, everybody looks at like the overnight successes of the world, right? And you don't see the pivots and the 10 years of eating ice cubes and toothpicks and, living on couches and things like that to suffer through to get to that overnight success. And obviously, you guys had an idea that was successful, but not successful enough, right, to build a business around and kind of scale from there. I guess, how did the AI agent to sales kind of come out? Because obviously it sounds like you always wanted to be AI even before AI was really a mainstream, thing. So how did you guys think about AI in the early years before everybody knew about ChatGPT and all the other ones?
I think it came down to we started, was it the like image generation changed a lot of things, because that's when you could type in like, I want to see a picture of Justin riding a dolphin over a beautiful sunset, right? And it would do that. It would do that in seconds. And so it was like, if you could get this language to generate an image, like, why can't it generate an expense report? Why can't it generate me an email or something more useful, right? And so we started iterating on, okay, if it can do X, why can't it do Y? If we can do Y, we can probably do Z. And you kind of just continue down this train until you ultimately get to this full workflow solution of, oh, I think we can ultimately do all of these things. Now, where do we start? Where do we get, square one to get this thing started and provide value?
And then what is a typical customer? Who is your kind of ICP that this is the perfect solution for their sales force?
Larger enterprises usually. So
Okay.
they've got hundreds, thousands of sellers in the field all day, every day, really struggle to record information and carry out a lot of those workflows. So it's not just the notes, but sending out the pricing proposal, getting a document signed, right? All of these things are non-negotiables in a sales process. They have to happen, but right now it's really slow. They often slip, they wait because they can't do it when they're out in the field. So those types of organizations and enterprises are the ones where we really find this solution resonates deeply.
So if you're a small business and if you're, and I guess industry wise, maybe before we go to the small business route, if you're, I think about field sales, I think about pharmaceutical sales and those types of reps that are, in doctors' offices and operating rooms and all that fun stuff. But obviously there's a ton of other field sales industries out there that are blue collar related and manufacturing related, et cetera. Are those the types of customers that, or what are the industries that you see are the most this is a game changer for our sales team?
Yeah, well, so it's funny you say roofing. We've got a roofing customer that we're working with because, right, the same thing. They're out in the field all day, every day. They've got to log all this information in Salesforce when they're on site, which is challenged. So there's also construction, real estate, everything in the life sciences, medical device, pharma, healthcare. All of those reps are in person, in the field all day, every day. Even in the financial services world, across the spectrum, because they're doing so many in-person meetings. Maybe it's not traditional door-to-door field sales, but it's a very similar motion of these in-person meetings. And they now have to get from in-person meeting to interacting with my CRM in some way. So those are some of the ones where we've seen some of the early signs of success.
Got it. And then I guess it sounds like you're targeting large enterprise with large field sales. Have you seen any kind of, B2B SaaS where a lot of the sales, while yes, people are going out and meeting customers, a lot of it is done like this via Zoom, right? And so while I have all of my CRM and all the stuff on probably my other screens, sometimes I'm lazy and I would love to just be like, hey, do the things that I'm supposed to do as opposed to typing it in and doing all the other stuff. Are you seeing those other industries that are not traditional quote unquote field sales, but they're still sales and still would love to just talk about creating an expense report versus actually doing it?
The problem is we've seen it, but we wind up getting viewed as a nice to have rather than need to have. So often the reps or a manager will come to us and be like, hey, I'd love my team to use this. And then as we start getting through the kind of sales and procurement process, it comes down to okay, do they really need this? Or is this something that you kind of want them to have? So for us, I think it's as we develop and mature and build kind of more sophisticated full workflow solutions across platforms, I'd like us to get and break into the inside sales space as well, but we're not quite there. So for the most part, our customers range from small businesses to enterprise, but they really are dominated by they have field reps. They've got people out in the field all day.
So staying on the AI kind of track, because obviously that's your business, do you see a point where sales, even field sales, is disrupted by AI, which essentially would require less and less field sales reps and more of those people either being replaced by AI agents or by inside sales reps because you can just order everything you need online?
Not anytime soon. So maybe we get there one day, but I think all of these industries have such a in-person heavy culture that it'll take something truly disruptive to break that. And I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day and they were essentially saying that a lot of sales are going to go more in person because of the amount of ability for AI, for anybody to create anything AI related and make it look pretty real. And so people are, maybe not going to trust that you and I are actually physically here talking to one another. It may be just our AI avatars that are just having this chat, right? So I think we're a way away from that, but I think it was just interesting to hear this person kind of talk about the AI causing people to want to be more in person than just sat behind a computer screen all day from a trust perspective, because they want to be able to see you and say, hey, no, this is what Trevor looks like, and he is tall or short or whatever the case is, and it's not just an avatar. I don't know if you're hearing any of that from like your customers about more of the in-person stuff versus remote, hybrid, or like virtual.
Well, I was going to say, Jason Lemkin's talked a lot about this from the standpoint of AI is at the point where it's better than most SDRs for inbound, right? Like if you have a good corpus of knowledge that can understand your product and what your company does, you can handle most of the like lead routing. You can handle most of the initial questions around the product. You can handle a lot of the initial discovery of, is somebody the right fit for our product? And so that really leaves like what's left. A lot of it that's going to be left is a human element, like building relationships with people, developing those relationships to be a trusted partner to solve not just a product problem, but a more strategic problem across the company. So I do think a lot of what we're doing now and more traditional inside sales is probably riper for disruption because AI can handle a lot of those lower cognitive tasks and force us, especially the best sales teams, to really build relationships.
Yeah, the art of the cold call is kind of not as abundant as it used to be, right? Because a lot of people are not sitting in an office, so you're calling their cell phone if you can find it, and you're interrupting something throughout the day versus being in an office and you're just interrupting their workday, which sometimes people are like, yeah, cool, I'll talk to you because it takes me away from having to talk to this other person that I don't want to talk to, right? Or instead of being disrupting their, hey, I was just taking my kid for a walk, or, I was going for a run or whatever. So I think that's the cold call is kind of an interesting dynamic right now. And not that you're an AI cold caller, but I guess talk a little bit about the setup, because the way I think about all this stuff is you've got to connect everything correctly so that I trust when I say create an expense report or create a quote for a client that I'm giving it enough information to create an accurate quote and they send it to the right person, and et cetera, et cetera. So what are some of the kind of guide rails that you put around the solution, or maybe checks and balances so that there isn't an oops, I sent the wrong quote, I missed a decimal point or put an extra zero? Like how does that work?
One of the big guardrails we have in place is just that the seller has to review everything before it goes into the system. So whenever they verbally dump everything into Myko will return in a clean format like what it's going to do, what are the different action items, what are the different fields it's going to enter or update, and let the seller verbally see it, review it, and confirm before anything gets pushed into the system. And so that's one of our big, main places that we catch things, right? It's not 100%. And so when we get it wrong, we get the wrong account, we put the wrong number, the seller can either edit it, then quickly edit it, fix the right one, and then send it off. Or sometimes they just need to completely restart, do it again, be like, that's not at all what I said, try one more time. And so that makes it so that the data going in isn't just total garbage without being reviewed by somebody.
Got it. So me doing a data dump after a meeting is almost like a note, obviously a voice note that then the AI is translating and saying, here's what I heard. Here are the things that I think I should do based on what you said, correct or not correct. And then it'll go do some of those things before anything is sent to the end customer, like the salesperson would need to confirm that to make sure that obviously they're not just on autopilot and just sending out random things to random companies. Is that high level how it works?
That's exactly right.
Got it. Yeah, because I love to test AI, but I'm also like, do I trust it fully yet? Do I want to just let it take over and send a quote to a client that may be a massive client that I've wanted to land for a decade, and I can't, I don't want to mess it up. So how has it been building a business, right? I think, everybody thinks about building a startup or being a startup founder, and, it's all this awesomeness. And obviously we already talked a little bit about some of the pivots that you've had to go through, but, you said you raised money. When did you raise that seed round? Like what year was it?
2023.
Okay. So 2023 was not an abundance of M&A activity. We were still kind of high interest rates. We weren't sure what was happening. So not a lot of companies were getting funded at that point. This wasn't 2021 where if your business had an LLC and was registered, you got money, it seemed like. So how was it kind of pivoting and then being able to raise money at a time period when raising money wasn't as easy for every company out there? And then kind of get us up to date on how the company is growing and expanding and all of that.
It was hard. It was really hard. We got rejected from every VC we pitched for months on end. We did lots of pitching, lots of attempts to fundraise. It was always a similar, you're too early, not interested in the market. Wound up very fortunately getting Khosla behind us, having gotten Vinod as the partner we work with. And so from that point, obviously it's like that little stamp of, okay, like you can continue on to the next stage. Like the business building process has only begun. Yeah. And from there, once again, it's navigating the idea maze, figuring out the right go to market, the right distribution model, getting the product right. It's hard. It's really hard for anyone building a company. They know it's a very challenging process. We enjoy it. We love it. We've had a great time. And really the last couple of months here, things have started to accelerate on our side. As we've started to get more users in the product, we've started to get more iterations, first enterprise customers, first enterprise expansions. You start to snowball that momentum, and we're starting to get the early signs of that. So definitely optimistic and in a good place now from both the growth and then where we see ourselves by year end.
And so how big is the company, if you're willing to share, like people wise? I'm just kind of curious, kind of, building an AI company. I was also going to ask, like, how many AI, how are you using AI? But let's start with like, how many humans do you work with? And then we'll talk about some of the tech.
Yeah, we're a small team. There are not many of us. I think we're using AI for everything from both on the engineering side. We use Cursor, obviously we use Copilot. A lot of the inbound we use AI for. I use AI on everything sales and marketing. So my best friend is deep research. Before I have any meeting, I'll go back and forth with deep research over break down this target account. Who are the people I need to know in the other departments who may impact whether or not we can sell? Has there been anything in any of their public information that might be relevant? I think we try and AI-ify everything we can, but at the same time, it's a challenge. Like as an early stage company, like you need the human interaction. There's not actually that many pieces we can truly automate because we haven't truly figured out the automatable pieces, right? So outbound, we don't have the perfect formula that we can automate of who we can get into. We're still figuring that out. So it's really just testing and iterating and figuring out how we can use AI for as much as possible so that we can just stay moving as quickly as we can.
And I guess if you think about kind of anybody else that's listening to this, that's going to maybe that were in your stage in the beginning, right? You had this idea of like, we want to build, this type of company, and it was a financial modeling tool, which then you realized wasn't the right path and you pivoted. Like, how hard is it to pivot when you have this idea that you've been maybe cultivating for years and you finally are like, hey, I'm going to start to put, pen to paper and actually, put some effort behind it? How hard is it to just then pivot when it's been your idea for a long time?
Mentally, it was almost the easiest part of parting with the idea and really staying flexible. I always go back to the example of like Amazon started as a bookstore. I don't necessarily think that Jeff Bezos back then was like, I want to build the greatest bookstore in the history of the world, and we're going to be a bookstore company. He thought about like the internet is this rapidly changing thing that's enabling this new type of commerce. Books is a great way to tap into that, and then we'll kind of see where this goes, right? And so I think very similarly, if you're evaluating ideas, you're evaluating products, you're evaluating your company, like say really focus on what is the long-term path and vision and how you want to potentially get there. It doesn't mean that what you're doing today has to be the initial starting point to get to that end point. There can be a lot of roads that'll lead you to that same end destination.
And when you decided to make that adjustment or that pivot, was it really like, hey, we are running out of money to fund us to get to the point where maybe this is a scalable business? Or was it somewhere around like, our customers were not just acquiring them fast enough? Because to your point, I think you said like it's a nice to have, not a need to have. So what were some of the measuring sticks that you used to say, okay, this is not going to work and I'm not willing to put more effort into it because we're hearing this from the market?
The combination of we're not growing fast enough because the conversations we're having with customers keep coming back to like, this is a pain point, but it's not the pain point. Like, this isn't what's getting me to buy today. And so after enough of those, enough being in market, you realize like, yes, there are a lot of companies out there. You could grow this company to, maybe low 6-figure ARR or maybe even a little bit larger, but like it was never really going to hyperscale the way we wanted it to and turn into a high growth business. And so just constantly reevaluating what our assumptions were and the underlying goal that we wanted to achieve wound us on not shiny object syndrome, but like we were thinking like, is there going to be a better way to achieve ultimately what we want to achieve, and just keeping our eyes and ears open.
And you talked a little bit about you're trying to AI-ify everything. I'm curious about maybe sharing some tools that you use. You mentioned one, I think, deep research. Like, what are some of the things that you as a startup founder are using to be as scrappy as you possibly can, but as efficient as you possibly can? And obviously, AI is at the center of that. So, anything that you can share that maybe other people should look into if they haven't already, that you've seen a lot of success to help you grow a business. And also maybe things that you've used in your business that have kind of made your life as a CEO easier instead of having to pay consultants or any other thing to kind of bring that in-house.
OpenAI is really life-changing from that standpoint. I mean, it can take so many different roles. And so as a founder, like that's been just a game changer for all of the different things it can do. And then you start going into the more specialized products and tools that we use. And so, using something like Opus Clips, so taking social like podcast clips and turning into social media content, using things like not just deep research, but even OpenAI, the image generation models. So for my LinkedIn content, I'm trying to think of what tools I have open right now. Lovable, use Lovable all the time to spin up landing pages, to spin up designs, spin up assets for customers on the fly. I've recently had a lot of success using Gamma to create PowerPoint structures and PowerPoint presentations. And so I'm just constantly always trying new tools and seeing what works, what sticks, and whether we should keep using them.
Lovable is that vibe coding app that everybody's been talking about, right? So you just kind of get in there and tell, because I think that's a verbal kind of tool as well, right? I've not used it, but I've heard about it. And that's something you can say, hey, I want to spin this up, or I want this created, and it'll code it and to the point where you can potentially use it. Maybe you can explain a little bit better.
Yeah, what I do is I go into OpenAI first and I say, hey, I want to create a landing page based on my company that does XYZ, blah, blah, blah. Give me the perfect prompt to put in a tool like this. So that when I put in that tool generates like exactly what I want. And that's been really effective, because then a lot of the like reasoning engine stays with OpenAI, and it goes to this other tool for what that tool, Lovable, is really good at, of generating like front end assets, images, content in a way that OpenAI is candidly just not as good at. And so the combination of the two becomes really powerful.
Yeah, I think it's funny when people are like, I don't know how to use like ChatGPT, and I'm like, well, just ask it. It'll tell you how to use it.
Yeah,
like it'll tell you, like you said, like write me a prompt to go put into this thing because this is what I want to do, and they're like, okay, and it creates you the prompt. You just copy paste, and then the other tool does the thing. So yeah, it's not as scary as people think from like a usability perspective. But
even if I tell people, even if you just tell it what you didn't like about the response, like if you ask it for something, however you would complain to your friend, be like, oh, this is super generic, you didn't give me that much. Like if you say that to ChatGPT, it'll respond and then give you more of what you're asking for. And so you really think about it like a thought partner from that standpoint.
Yeah, I'm glad you used the word thought partner, because I use it a lot as a entrepreneur myself, and I don't have a board of people that I can bounce ideas off of, and so I have a separate Chat GPT project where it is my thought partner, and I have it interview me based on something I'm trying to work through or a client I'm trying to help, and it'd be amazed at what you can come up with collaboratively with Chat GPT, and as long as you tell it what persona you want it to be, and it's kind of weird to talk to it and have it talk back to you verbally.
Have you used the voice mode much?
I have not much, but I have. One day I was just sitting in my office and I was like, let me just fire this thing up and just go after. And it was just weird for a bit, and then it kind of became normal, where it was just a chat with a very smart friend that can reference pretty much anything. So it was it was fascinating. I know a lot of people that go on walks when they want to think about something and they just talk to ChatGPT and just it talks back. It's just kind of weird. I guess, if we think about the business and where it's going, it sounds like you guys are, on a upward trajectory. And I'm curious about the kind of, where are your customers, like resisting? Like, do you get resistance from sales reps that are like, I don't want to use this. I've got a tried and true way of doing this that hasn't failed me yet. Like, how do you get over that kind of like, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thought process?
Where we get blocked is usually from kind of the Salesforce admin teams or general operations teams at a company. And usually it's because either of those teams are too busy with other things that they don't want to add another project, another implementation, another AI tool to their plate. So usually we see the business teams, it's a very clear and compelling pitch, right? It's like, instead of using Salesforce mobile app, clicking 100 times, just use voice, say everything you want to do, and it's done. People get it. It's very vivid in terms of like how they can use it. It's really the like internal operations and large, enterprise selling processes where you usually get slowed down.
That's fascinating. Yeah, because I feel like I run into people that are old school, and you could be very young and still be old school. But they kind of get in this like rut of like, well, this is how I do things. So, I'm that way with some of my processes. I'm like, there's 1,000,001 recruiting AI tools out there, and some of them I've demoed are okay. Some of them are good, but some of them are not, and they're not effective in how I run my business. But so yeah, I was just curious kind of see how you guys react. I guess as you think about kind of the next phase of your company's journey, and let's say we jump on a podcast 12 months from now, what's like one or two things that you're like, if we achieve these things in the next 12 months, like that podcast is going to be like a really good conversation?
The first one I think is continuing to develop as many daily active users of our active user base as possible. And so as we're onboarding customers, we know they should be in Salesforce daily. They're not. That's the big challenge. That's why they come to a tool like ours. They're not when they should be. If we can get them to be and effectively using it every day, that's how we know, like our product is really doing something right. We've made it easy enough for them to carry out these workflows in a way that the workflows are no longer painful. I think that's just like the big overarching goal of like, if we can show users enough value that they're coming back to us on a daily basis across our rollouts, that becomes really critical. And I think B, just developing our use cases across more industries. So we're in a few industries now, but we're really not across all industries yet. And so as we're still growing and scaling each industry we break into, each one's different. Each one has their own terminology. Each one has their own use cases. I think if in a year from now, we're in, let's call it 9 different industries rather than where we are now, probably 3 or 4 industries, we'll be in a much better place because we'll have a lot clearer roadmap for what does that go to market in each industry look like and how we can really serve those customers.
Got it. I guess as we kind of round this thing out, like if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking about starting a business, or maybe that, like we talked about earlier, they're in this pivot point where they're like, gosh, I've been cramming at this thing for a year or so and it's just not getting any bigger, or I'm getting the same rejection. Like, what's some advice you have just for somebody that's thinking about or has started a business right now to, get to that next phase of growth?
I think staying positive to the best you can and just like grinding it out is something as a founder you have to do. Not the flip side, not the counter, but what goes along with that is you don't want to grind for the sake of grinding. Like you have to constantly be iterating and be flexible around what that means. So if you've gotten like the fundraising stuff is much different than the sales stuff. If you've gotten a no from 100 people you've tried to sell to, you got to sell them either a different product or you need different sales script. You need completely different sales pitch, sales motion.
Yep.
On the fundraising side, it's much wonkier, right? Like you could literally pitch 100 people and 101st is the one that's going to say yes.
Right.
But on the sales side, like you really do get clear signals pretty quickly. Where if people aren't saying like, this is a pain point, this is a product that solves my pain point and I'm willing to pay for this pain point, it means you need to target something different or the market's not ready for it. This is probably more for B2B than B2C, but around the B2B, like you just need to find that initial wedge and you got to keep grinding to get that wedge. And that wedge might be different than what you think it is, but you have to keep trying to get to it.
Yeah, I think I had somebody on the podcast probably 3 or 4 episodes ago, and they just kept saying, going back to like, the customer will tell you if they're going to buy. If you don't ask the customer what they are willing to pay for, like a lot of people will do a free demo, right? Or they'll do a free pilot or be part of your beta. But if you have 100 companies that are doing your beta that's free, and only 2 of them are going to pay you for the same thing, well, there's your answer. Yeah. Right? Like that's not potentially not a viable business. Maybe you need to pivot, ask the other 98 why they weren't interested in paying for this, and maybe what they would pay for, because it may be something completely different or just slightly different that you're not offering. So yeah, a lot of the people I've talked to, it's around like, trust your customer, because they're the ones that are going to pay for what you're selling, right?
Yeah. I think that was one lesson we learned the hard way too, of just try and sell, like see if people will buy it. And if they won't buy it, there's a reason they won't buy it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Trevor, this has been a lot of fun. I'm sure we could get really, really deep down the AI rabbit hole. But I want to be respectful of your time and the audience's ears to hear the same conversation on AI over and over again. But I do want to end the episode with the 3-pack of questions that I ask every guest here. So first question here is, what is a influential book or podcast that you would recommend somebody to listen to?
The BG2 podcast with Brad Gerstner and Bill Gurley has been really beneficial in shaping how I think about AI and what AI is going to mean both this year and then in the future. And so that's one that I highly recommend to everybody.
BG2, I'd not heard of that. I will check that out.
Especially they did one episode with Satya, the Microsoft CEO. That was
gosh, that'll be interesting. Yeah. Awesome. So second question here, what's your favorite thing to do outside of work?
Probably go to the beach with my fiance and my dog.
Got it. Well, being in Miami, I'm sure that's a pretty simple task for you guys to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's right here.
And this may be an interesting question because you live in most people's vacation spot in Miami. I guess what is a good vacation spot for you? Is it another beach, or is it the opposite, going into the mountains?
Yeah, probably beaches. We were recently in Italy for a little bit, and the beaches there are gorgeous.
What part of Italy?
Rapallo, the Liguria region.
Very cool. Well, my wife and I went to Italy last year. We didn't go to the beaches. We went to Tuscany and just sat in vineyards and sipped some wine, which was delightful.
Not bad either.
Yeah. It wasn't terrible. Awesome, Trevor. This has been a lot of fun. If people want to reach out to you, connect with you, learn about your business, maybe they have a field sales team and they would love to hear more about Myko, or they just maybe they're a founder and they want to just pick your brain about how to get unstuck if they are. And what is the best way to connect with you?
Usually LinkedIn. So just add me on LinkedIn, shoot me a message. I spend a lot of time there, fortunately or unfortunately.
You and me both. No, but yeah, we'll make sure that is in the show notes. So Trevor, man, appreciate the time and thank you for being a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a blast.
I hope you found at least one actionable insight from this episode of the Growth Capital Podcast, your one-stop shop for insights from private equity leaders, CEOs, and startup entrepreneurs on starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, as well as the role having the right talent plays in growing a successful business. It would be greatly appreciated if you would rate and review this podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and drop us a comment so we can expand the audience of this podcast. Thank you for all your support, and don't forget about upcoming episodes dropping every Tuesday.